It's definitely hard to argue who has the best quarterback room, the best running back room, or the best defense in college football, but I don't think it's particularly close to argue who has the best wide receiver room. I know many Ohio State fans will think they are number one, but I currently think they are number two. I think the Clemson Tigers have the best wide receiver room in all of college football this year, and they have three guys who all should be first-round picks at some point and are ridiculously exciting. In today's video, we're going to do a deep dive into this receiver room, what has made them so stacked, how these players got to this point, and also how good I think each one of them could be. It's headlined by Antonio Williams, Bryant Wesco, and TJ Moore. But before we get started, if you're a big fan of college football, be sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like if you support today's video, and let me know what player, team, topic, or situation I can cover next. Now let's go ahead and get started and talk about the most loaded wide receiver room in all of college football, the 2025 Clemson Tigers. Okay, so the first guy I want to talk about is Bryant Wesco Jr. He was one of the most exciting freshman receivers in the country last year, and Wesco ended up finishing with 41 catches for 708 yards and 5 touchdowns, and obviously has a ton of hype for 2025. But going back in time, he ended up coming out of Midlothian High School in Texas, and they don't play around when it comes to football. They have a JV team, a freshman team, and a varsity team, and they play in one of the most stacked conferences in a stacked area, the Dallas-Fort Worth region. This area is full of Power 5 recruits, and Doug Wendell, the coach there, had known about Wesco since he was in 7th grade. He had been one of the top players in the area for quite some time, and he had tracked his progress over the years. He almost transferred to a different high school at one point, but it ended up working out for him, and he decided to stay around. He was a lanky kid who could make a middle school quarterback look good, which is not the easiest task. He was a rising star on the freshman team, and then as a junior, he absolutely torched defenses in his second year on varsity. The Blue Blood college football programs were on Wesco early, and even more after he caught 56 passes for 1,072 yards and 12 touchdowns on a run-heavy offense. The passing game was pretty much titled "Get It to Bryant Wesco," and he still managed to put up incredible numbers. He ended up having official visits to USC, Clemson, LSU, and TCU, and the Oklahoma Sooners were also in the mix for him. He ended up choosing the Clemson Tigers and was the 4th highest ranked receiver to ever commit there, behind Roscoe Crosby, Sammy Watkins, and Deion Kane. One scout said, quote, "He reminds me of the type of receivers Clemson had when they had it cranking, a big guy that can run on the outside and win the football." According to 24/7 Sports, Wesco was a 4-star recruit, the number 11 receiver, and the 57th best player in the class of 2024. Going into his freshman season, Wesco checked in at 170 pounds and was a mid-year enrollee. He was the lightest non-kicker on the Clemson roster and the most featherweight scholarship freshman wideout ever under Coach Sweeney. Obviously, he would need to get in the weight room and get that figured out if he ever wanted to be a big-time star, but it didn't seem to matter. He was extremely good. He ended up making it as a freshman All-American last season and had a really hot start to the season. In week 2 against App State, he caught 3 passes for 130 yards and a touchdown, and then against Stanford, he had 2 catches for 104 yards and a touchdown. He then had 4 catches against Florida State, a career-high 7 catches against Louisville, and then 3 apiece against both the Citadel and Pitt. To finish the year, he had 5 catches in their loss against South Carolina, but he really made a name for himself in the postseason. Against SMU in the ACC title game, Wesco had the best game of his career, finishing with 8 catches for 143 yards and 2 touchdowns as they won by a crazy field goal and made the college football playoff. Against the Texas Longhorns in the first round, Wesco had 3 catches for 30 yards, and he finished the year with 41 receptions for 708 yards and 5 touchdowns. He was one of the top freshmen in all of college football last year, and he became the first Tigers receiver since Sammy Watkins to have 2 100-yard receiving games in their first 4 games of their career. It was an excellent freshman season for him, as he averaged 17.3 yards per catch and was a big play threat. His 707 yards only trailed Jeremiah Smith and Ryan Williams amongst true freshman wideouts, and now he's considered one of the top returning players in college football, as according to PFF, he is the number 7 best returning wide receiver for 2025. Wesco is full of talent, but there's still 2 other guys who are just as good, and if not better than him. The next one I want to talk about is TJ Moore. As last season for the Tigers, Moore caught 45 passes for 651 yards and 5 total touchdowns, and that guy was absolutely electric. He ended up growing up in the Sunshine State of Florida and eventually blew up as an insane athlete in the Tampa area. Eventually at Tampa Catholic, he did blow up, and Moore said, quote, "I didn't start playing until the spring of my sophomore year. At first it started off slow, but after one game, it started to blow up. He caught 4 passes for 140 yards and 2 touchdowns in his first game, and received offers from about 20 schools after that. He was an absolute elite receiver, and when he committed to the Tigers, he gave an immediate jolt of excitement to the fan base as he committed to Clemson over Florida, Georgia, and Tennessee, just to name a few. What separated Clemson from some of the other schools that recruited him? Well, his mother said, quote, "For me, it was the statistics, the facts, and the proof. Their vision for our son as a young man was not just a football player. TJ was one of not very many that was offered in the 2024 class, and that speaks for itself." He said when it came down to making his final decision, teams were throwing money at him and trying to bribe him, but Clemson felt right. He chose the Tigers over pretty much every school in the country, and as a junior, he caught 45 passes for 1,169 yards and 20 total touchdowns. The guy had nearly 1,600 all-purpose yards, and he was a star in high school. In total, in just 2 years, he recorded 92 catches for 2,300 yards and 32 touchdowns, and was a big play monster and would definitely fit in the Clemson offense. He was compared to T. Higgins, and according to 24/7 Sports, TJ Moore was a 5-star recruit, the number 4 wideout, and the 21st best player in the nation. When he arrived at Clemson, he had a decent amount of fanfare, and in his first game, he'd catch 1 pass against Georgia. In week 2, he'd have his first career touchdown against App State, and then would continue to get better as the season went on. He caught 2 passes and a touchdown against Florida State, 4 catches against Wake Forest, and then 4 catches for 78 yards and a touchdown in a win over Virginia. He then had 5 more catches against Louisville, a touchdown against Virginia Tech, 3 catches and a win over Pitt, and then against number 15 South Carolina, he caught 6 passes for 65 yards as well. He had become a really good option for them, and then he ended up turning it on in the postseason as well. He'd have 3 catches against SMU in the ACC title, and then against Texas, he became their top player, catching 9 passes for 116 yards and a touchdown, but they would unfortunately lose by 2 touchdowns. In total, TJ Moore finished with 45 receptions for 651 yards and 5 total touchdowns, but he was obviously just scratching the surface on how good he could be. He's consistently ranked as a top 15 to top 20 receiver for the 2025 college football season, and honestly is scratching the surface because he's still somewhat new to football. And the last guy on the list I want to talk about is Antonio Williams, who's right now being projected as the number 1 wide receiver for the 2026 NFL Draft. Last year, Williams finished with 75 catches for 904 yards and 11 total touchdowns, but going back in time, he was always supposed to sort of be here. His stepfather ended up being an all-SEC player for the Ole Miss basketball team back in the day, and they were one of the first schools to offer Antonio coming up out of high school. He ended up growing up in upstate South Carolina before he would move with his family to Columbia before middle school. He'd end up missing his sophomore season due to an injury, and then 2020 hit. He eventually set the recruiting world on fire, and it all started with an offer from South Carolina at the end of his junior season. The offers then came pouring in, and as a junior, he finished with 64 catches for 1,300 yards and nearly 2,000 all-purpose yards to go along with 17 total touchdowns. He was always wondering when he was going to get an offer from Clemson, though. He was at Dutch Fork High School, and eventually he got one from Dabo Swinney and the Tigers. He ended up attending a Clemson game against Wake Forest with his teammate Jarvis Green, and Clemson was not listed on Antonio's final 6 schools, but they were definitely a contender. His dream school at one time was apparently Alabama, but that never ended up happening. As I said, Clemson was not in his final 6, but they made a strong push for him in November, and eventually they did go all in on him, as they missed out on Andre Green, who went to North Carolina. Antonio chose the Tigers over USC, Auburn, Georgia, and Ole Miss, and he ended up finishing his senior season with 2,600 all-purpose yards, 1,600 which came through the air, on 85 catches and 20 total touchdowns. In total, Antonio Williams was a 4-star recruit, the number 6 wide receiver, and the 61st best player in the class of 2022. He ended up becoming a freshman All-American for the Tigers, as during his first season all the way back in 2022, Antonio blew up. He finished with 56 catches for 604 yards and 4 touchdowns, and his best game came against Louisville, which he had 10 receptions for 83 yards and a touchdown in that one. Antonio unfortunately would not have a great 2023 season due to being injured, but he still finished with 21 catches for 208 yards and 2 touchdowns in just 5 games. He came back for their bowl matchup against Kentucky and caught 5 passes in that one, but his real good season was this past year in 2024. In week 1, he caught 6 passes for 76 yards against Georgia and was seemingly the only functional piece on offense for them, and then had 3 catches and a touchdown against App State. He had 2 more touchdowns against NC State, and then would have touchdowns against both Florida State and Wake Forest. He had 7 catches against Louisville and 13 catches against Pitt. He also had 2 touchdowns and 149 receiving yards in that game, and he continued to dominate. He had 72 yards and 2 touchdowns against the Citadel, 8 catches for 99 yards in that close loss to South Carolina, and then in the postseason, he had 5 catches for 50 yards against SMU, and 4 catches for 66 yards and a touchdown against Texas. Williams became one of the better receivers in the ACC, as he was named a first-team All-ACC selection, and that was the first time it had happened since Amari Rodgers and Cornell Powell all the way back in 2020. He became the first Clemson wideout with over 75 catches since Amari Rodgers, and the first to hit double-digit touchdowns since T. Higgins. ESPN released its rankings of top 10 receivers in college football, and Antonio Williams checked in at number 6. Right now, he's considered one of the top receivers in college football for next year, and also was recently projected to go in the first round. Some currently have him as wide receiver 1 or 2 for the 2026 draft, which is pretty insane, and Williams is definitely living up to the hype. So yeah, they have a guy who's supposed to be a potential top 10 pick, and then they had 2 of the top freshmen last year. They have 2 guys who are ranked in the top 10 and 3 overall in the top 15. It's why I think Clemson has the best receiver room in college football for next year, and I know Ohio State fans will try to make an argument, as yeah, they have Jeremiah Smith Jr., but outside of that, it is still just a lot of potential and what-ifs, and I'm sure a lot of them will be really good for Ohio State this fall, but they haven't yet proved it like these Clemson guys have. But what do you guys think? If you're a Clemson fan, what do you think of these receivers? Who do you think has the best wide receiver room in college football? And which team or position group should I do this for next? Be sure to let me know down below, leave a like if you want to support today's video, subscribe if you're new, and check out my other videos on the end screen, including my video about Clemson's 2025 quarterback room. Hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.